Hello viewers! The car battery is a simple component. It gets charged by the alternator when the engine runs and provides electricity for various electric components on board. Because of that, most of us rarely think about it, taking its role for granted. That is, at least until the battery goes flat and our car refuses to start when we turn the key, which is when it usually needs to be replaced. And, as I shall now show, this isn't an overly complex job, providing you follow these simple steps. As with anything else, we'll start with a bit of health and safety, because even the simplest of jobs can become hazardous if you aren't cautious enough. For a start, batteries store electricity, meaning they could give you a mild electric shock if not handled properly. To avoid this, make sure not to wear any metal jewelry such as a ring, watch or bracelet, because they might act as a conductor in contact with battery terminals. Also, bear in mind the batteries contain acids, which might release harmful gases. This is why you should avoid removing it in enclosed spaces, such as a garage with poor ventilation. Instead, park your car on the driveway, as this will minimize the exposure to hazardous gas. Also, these gases are quite flammable, meaning they might cause an explosion if there is some sparking while working around the battery. On the other hand, you don't want to work on wet surfaces, as this would significantly increase the chances of an electric shock. In simple words, you shouldn't be doing this while standing on a floor that's covered with water. Lastly, gloves for your hands and safety goggles to protect the eyes. Sure, you might think this is an overkill, and I hear you, but if you want to be on the safe side, it won't hurt. So, with the health and safety sorted out, it's time to remove that old worn battery and put a new one in its place. Before disconnecting the battery, we must turn off the ignition and remove the key. Also, it's a good idea to leave the driver's door open, as sometimes a car will lock itself while its battery is being replaced. If you have an automatic, check if it's in park, and if it's a manual transmission, shift it into first gear. Once the ignition has been turned off, open the hood by pulling the hood lever or pressing the button. It is usually located below or near the steering wheel. This is actually only half of the job, as you will still have to release the latch at the front, which can sometimes be quite piddly. If you're having trouble finding out how this is done, check the owner's manual, where this procedure should be clearly illustrated. Also, I must mention that some cars have a battery in the trunk, and if that's the case with your vehicle, forget about the whole pop the hood procedure. Having found the battery, whether under the hood, in the trunk or somewhere else, you should now figure out which terminal is positive and which is the negative one. The best way to do this is by looking for plus and minus signs on the battery casing near the terminals or on the cable clamps. In some cars, the terminals will be hidden beneath the plastic caps, though these will usually have corresponding symbols on them. Now, some might say I'm overcomplicating. The red cable is for the positive terminal and the black cable is for the negative. And while this usually is the case, there are some cars that use different colors, so don't jump to any conclusions here. With the terminals identified, you can now disconnect the battery, which is done by removing the negative cable first. To do this, use a suitable wrench or a socket, it'll usually be a 10mm, and loosen the bolt that holds the cable clamp in place. Once the clamp is loose, remove it from the battery terminal and push it out of the way. Now do the same with the positive cable. Undo the bolt on the clamp and remove it from the battery's terminal. But while doing this, make sure the cable doesn't touch any metal parts of the car. This is more of a precaution in case there is some charge left in the car's electrical circuit. Next, check if there is a strap or a metal bracket holding the battery in place. If there is, and most cars will have it, you'll have to remove it. This again will involve finding an appropriately sized socket, which you'll use to undo the bolt or nut on the bracket. Once both cables have been removed and the bracket loosened, it's time to finally remove the battery. Depending on the car and available space, this may require some patience and gentle maneuvering. Also bear in mind the batteries are quite heavy, especially if you drive a truck or an SUV, as they can have a battery that weighs up to 40 pounds. Installing the new battery is a simple case of redoing everything in a reverse order. Put it into its place, fit the bracket or strap, whatever your car has, reconnect the positive terminal first, and lastly, the negative terminal. And of course, if the car hasn't been hooked up to a charger during the battery replacement, you'll have to reset the clock and radio after all this is completed. If you've been paying attention so far, you must have noticed I mentioned and strongly stressed out the order in which the terminals should be done and undone. The negative cable is disconnected first and reconnected last, while it's the opposite for the positive cable. The reason for this is simple. If you're undoing the cable clamps using an ordinary wrench, just like this one, there is always a chance of being a bit clumsy and touching the surrounding metal parts, chassis, fenders, what have you. Now, if you do this while working on the negative terminal, nothing will happen, as this cable is connected to the chassis anyways. But if you're loosening the positive terminal first and accidentally touch something with the wrench, this will create a short circuit because the negative cable is still connected. Besides giving you a fair electric shock, this can damage the battery or, even worse, destroy some of the car's sensitive and expensive electronics. With the new battery fitted and cables firmly tightened up, it's job done in most cases. Still, in many newer cars, you should perform something called battery registration. To put it simply, this is a process in which you tell the car what kind of battery you fitted to it and what capacity it has. With that information, the car's onboard computer will optimally set the alternator to keep the battery fully charged at all times while avoiding any potential overcharging situations. The procedure is, in most cases, simple, but it does require a diagnostic tool capable of performing this. A box standard code reader will not do the trick here. All you need to do is hook up the device, find the battery registration menu, and enter the relevant data, such as whether the battery is a wet cell or an AGM, and capacity. With all this done, hit OK and you're good to go. One thing you might notice when removing the battery is a white-green substance on its terminals and cable clamps. This is called corrosion, and it forms when there is a slight acid leak from the battery. And because these buildups can obstruct the flow of electricity, you should remove them, which can easily be done using some stuff you have at home. This includes gloves, baking soda, a toothbrush, and a cup of warm water. Making the cleaner is simple. Just mix 1 tablespoon of baking soda in a cup of water and mix it well. Next, dip the toothbrush into the cleaner and start cleaning the terminals. You should apply some force, as the dust and grime may be difficult to remove. Scrub the terminals thoroughly until there is no dirt visible, and when it's all clean, spray some water on the terminals and wipe them off gently with a clean cloth or rag. Once the terminals have been cleaned and dried, apply petroleum jelly to them. This will provide some lubrication and prevent any further corrosion. And that would be all about you need to know about battery replacement. I hope this video was helpful, and if so, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up and share it with your friends. On the other hand, if you're having other car-related issues, check out other videos here or visit our site mechanicbase.com for more detailed automotive repair guides. Bye!